PBS Masterpiece has way more than just Downton Abbey. There's the Napoleonic series that made Sean Bean a star, or a love triangle in 1930s England with Rosamund Pike before she was famous. Let's see if you recognize even a single one. In 2001, before Tom Hooper became the guy who directed The King's Speech, he made this BBC miniseries adapting Nancy Mitford's novels about English aristocrats between the world wars. It follows three cousins, the Radlett girls, trying to figure out love and life in the 1930s upper class. The narrator is Fanny, played by a very young Rosamund Pike. She's the sensible one, the observer, and she's constantly bouncing between her eccentric Radlett relatives and her flighty socialite mother. The show is basically Downton Abbey meets Evelyn Waugh, but it's based on Mitford's actual family. The Radletts are inspired by her real sisters, the Mitford sisters, who were this famous, scandalous bunch. The screenwriter here was Deborah Mogek, who later wrote the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, so she knew how to handle this kind of material. She adapted it with real affection for Mitford's wicked wit. Excellent period recreation, just never became a pop culture phenomenon for some reason. If you want to see young, dashing Sean Bean before Game of Thrones, this is where you go. Sharpe's Rifles launched this whole series of Napoleonic adventure films for TV. It's set in 1809 during the Peninsular War, and it introduces Richard Sharpe, a rugged British sergeant who unexpectedly becomes an officer. The problem is, Sharpe's a commoner. He got promoted from the ranks, and suddenly he has to lead this elite unit called the Chosen Men. The aristocratic officers look down on him, and his own riflemen resent taking orders from someone who's not a proper officer. The series took off. They ended up making 16 films. Sean Bean's performance was so good that Bernard Cornwell, the author who wrote the original Sharpe novels, dedicated a book to Bean and said he now hears Sean's voice when he writes the character. That's how perfect the casting was. Campion is a BBC period mystery series set in the 1930s England. It's about an amateur detective named Albert Campion, played by Peter Davison, who you might know as the fifth Doctor Who. Campion's this suave, deceptively meek aristocrat with a mysterious past, and he's got this loyal, rough-edged manservant played by Brian Glover. Every episode they're solving murders and thefts among Britain's upper crust. The stories are adapted from Marjorie Allingham's novels, and the whole thing has this light, period charm to it. The first mystery here is kind of meandering to the point of distraction, but it has that fetching period detail that usually makes these shows work. The show's producer was John Hawksworth, who'd worked on Upstairs Downstairs, so he knew how to do period pieces right. There's top-notch costumes, perfect settings, and all the details that make you believe you're actually in the 1930s. In 1903, Arthur Conan Doyle's wife died. He's famous, Sherlock Holmes is everywhere, but he's restless and grieving. Then he hears about this case. An Anglo-Indian solicitor named George Adalji got convicted of mutilating animals in rural Staffordshire, and Conan Doyle becomes convinced the guy was innocent. The case had everything wrong with it. George was mixed race in Edwardian England, which already put a target on him. The evidence was weak, but prejudice was strong, and he ended up in prison for something he didn't do. Conan Doyle, the guy who created the world's most famous detective, decides he's going to become one himself. Arthur and George is a three-part drama based on Julian Barnes's novel about this real investigation. It's a gentle, classy mystery that doesn't rush. The Edwardian detail is rich, the performances are solid, and the production took authenticity seriously. They filmed in the actual locations where this happened, the Edwardian towns of Great Wireley and London. They even used the real courtroom where Adalji's case was reviewed and Doyle's personal letters about the case. 14 episodes. That's how long The Jewel and the Crown runs, and it needs every minute because it's covering the collapse of the British Empire in India. A British woman named Daphne falls in love with an Indian journalist named Hari. One night they're meeting in secret and Daphne gets gang assaulted by unknown attackers. Hari gets beaten and arrested. They imprison him without trial, and that sets off this chain of events that exposes how rotten the entire colonial system was. The series follows dozens of characters, British and Indian, through World War II, through the independence uprisings, all the way to partition in 1947. It's about forbidden love and colonial guilt and the sunset of an empire, and it doesn't look away from how ugly it got. And you end up deeply caring about these characters even though you know how this story ends. You know the empire falls, you know partition is coming, but you're invested anyway. The scale was massive for television. They filmed this thing in India over 8 months with hundreds of local extras. It's kind of like Brideshead Revisited in some way, one of the peaks of 1980s British drama. Hornblower is a series of 8 films about a teenage kid who joins the Royal Navy during the Napoleonic Wars and has to figure out how not to die. He starts as this awkward 17-year-old who gets seasick and doesn't fit in. There's a bully he has to deal with, there are French ships trying to kill him, and he's stuck on a cramped warship with nowhere to hide. But he's smart and he starts figuring things out. Each film throws you into naval warfare in the 1790s. It's high seas adventure done well on a TV budget. The production even won an Emmy for Outstanding Miniseries in 1999. It looks really cinematic for television. Real ship sets, convincing battle sequences, actual effort put into recreating Nelson's Navy. They built a massive partial ship in a studio and even filmed aboard the real HMS Victory to get the details right. This one is an adaptation of a Thomas Hardy's novel about a woman named Bathsheba. She inherits a farm in the 1870s, rural England, and there's 3 men who want to marry her. Gabriel Oak is the humble shepherd who proposes first. She turns him down because she doesn't love him. Then her fortune changes. She gets wealthy, he loses everything, and he ends up working for her. He stays loyal while she gets distracted by the other 2. There's Boldwood, a middle-aged farmer, and there's Sergeant Troy, a handsome soldier who's charming and completely unreliable. Bathsheba makes some bad choices and the story follows what happens. This 1998 version holds up against the famous Julie Christie film from 1967. The dialogue here feels more natural, kind of rougher and truer to how Hardy actually wrote. They filmed it in Hardy's actual countryside, Dorset and Wiltshire, and even found a working 19th century farm for the sheep shearing scenes. All these little details make it feel authentic instead of just people in period costumes reading lines. It's a faithful adaptation that respects the source material and thankfully doesn't try to modernize Hardy's story. A few years ago, Masterpiece aired this British show about World War II that almost nobody remembers now, and that's a shame because ITV completely screwed it over. Home Fires is set in a small English village in 1939. The men went off to war and the women who stayed behind had to figure out how to keep everything running. 2 of them, Frances and Joyce, couldn't stand each other at first, but they ended up working together because when there's a war on, personal grudges start looking pretty petty. The show isn't trying to be flashy. There's no big action sequences, no spy thriller stuff, just well-acted drama about regular people dealing with extraordinary circumstances. People really connected with it. Then after 2 seasons, ITV canceled it on a cliffhanger. The backlash was immediate. Social media filled up with angry fans wanting to know why ITV would kill a critically praised show while keeping stuff like X Factor on the air. Even George R.R. Martin, who watches Masterpiece on PBS, publicly said he was upset about the cancellation. And the worst part was that the writers had already written half of season 3 when they got the cancellation notice. Nobody saw it coming. The cast and crew were blindsided too. Julian Fellowes finished Downton Abbey in 2015 and immediately turned around and made this 3-part thing based on an Anthony Trollope novel. It's basically more Downton, just condensed. Dr. Thorne has been raising his niece Mary in a village somewhere in England. She's illegitimate and broke, though most people don't know that. She falls for Frank Gresham, who's going to inherit the local estate. Frank's family has a problem, though. They're completely bankrupt. His mother needs him to marry money. Mary has none. Lady Arabella tells her in not-so-polite terms that she's not good enough. It's classic period drama territory. Poor girl loves rich boy, his family says no. Then Fellowes throws in complications. There's a drunk millionaire who built railways and happens to be Mary's secret uncle. He's dying and might leave her everything. Hearts get broken, secrets spill out. Everything gets resolved by episode 3 because Trollope always wrapped things up neatly. It's cozy. Lots of bonnets and banner and people learning lessons about humility and true love. When Downton ended, this gave fans a little taste of the same thing for a few nights. Comfort viewing. Denmark made this historical drama about a war nobody outside Denmark really knows about, and Masterpiece aired it with subtitles, which probably explains why most people missed it. 1864 was the year Denmark went to war with Prussia and Austria. It went horribly. Denmark lost a third of its territory. The country never really got over it. The show follows two brothers from some village who both love the same girl. War breaks out, everyone gets swept up in patriotism. The brothers join up and end up at this place called Diebel, where the Danes tried to hold off the Prussian army. The battle scenes are genuinely brutal. People compared them to Saving Private Ryan, and that's not an exaggeration. Soldiers dying from cholera, killing themselves, charging into enemy fire over and over, knowing it's pointless. Meanwhile, back in Copenhagen, the politicians are making terrible decisions that doom everyone at the front. Danish historians came after this show hard, said it got facts wrong, said it was pushing modern politics onto history. The show caught a lot of heat for that, but watching it as drama, the production is gorgeous. The battles are intense in a way most period pieces never attempt. The story about the brothers holds up even if you don't understand Danish history or politics. Same year as Home Fires, there was this other British period drama that Masterpiece picked up. Indian Summers is set in 1932 in Simla, which was where British colonial officials went to escape the heat of the Indian plains. Think of it as the summer capital of the Raj. The show follows British elites and Indians whose lives tangle up as the independence movement is gaining steam. You have Ralph Whelan, this ambitious bureaucrat working for the Viceroy, and his sister Alice, who shows up from England with some mysterious baggage. Then there is Cynthia, played by Julie Walters, running the Royal Club and doing everything she can to preserve British privilege. The series ran 2 seasons, taking the story from 1932 to 1935. It had all the visual opulence you'd expect: cocktail parties, tennis on lawns, that whole colonial facade. But underneath that, it dealt with interracial romance, gay relationships, political conspiracies, and even murders. There's more scandal and sex than Downton Abbey ever attempted. It looks gorgeous, and the first season is genuinely compelling. Second season took a noticeable dive in quality, but that first season is something special. PBS made their first original American drama in over a decade with Mercy Street, and they set it during the Civil War in a place nobody had really explored before, a Union Army hospital. The show takes place in 1862 in Alexandria, Virginia. The Union had occupied the city, but it was full of Southern sympathizers. The Army seized this luxury hotel and turned it into Mansion House Hospital, and that's where the series unfolds. Mary is a nurse from New England. She's an abolitionist, a widow, comes in expecting to help the war effort and finds complete chaos. She clashes with Dr. Jed Foster, the chief surgeon who's dealing with his own demons and an opium addiction. The series didn't shy away from how brutal Civil War medicine was. Amputations, infections, disease everywhere. But it also made a point of showing that doctors weren't just butchers. They actually used anesthesia. They had innovative techniques. They were trying their best with what they had. This BBC drama is one of the gentlest war stories you'll ever see. It's set in Northern Ireland in 1943 when the U.S. Army Air Force built a base near this tiny village. The story's told through the eyes of the Coyne family, specifically 8-year-old Francis, who's narrating as an adult looking back. His mother Rose is a school teacher. She's English, which already makes her a bit of an outsider in this rural Irish Catholic community. Then 4,000 American GIs show up next door, and suddenly she's even more isolated. The show is all about culture clash. These gum-chewing Americans with their Jeeps and aviator sunglasses meeting a conservative Irish village with strict social rules. But it's not really about battles or military action. It's about how big world events affect small lives, how a war thousands of miles away changes relationships and innocence in one quiet community. It's definitely slower and gentler than something like Poldark, but if you want something wistful and atmospheric that takes its time with characters, it delivers that specific mood really well. The Miniaturist is this gothic mystery set in Amsterdam in 1686. Anya Taylor-Joy plays Nella, who's just married this wealthy merchant way older than her. She moves into his house expecting married life, except he's distant and won't touch her. As a wedding gift, he gives her this elaborate cabinet dollhouse, an exact miniature replica of their actual house. Nella starts hiring someone called a miniaturist to make tiny furniture and objects for it. Except the pieces that start showing up are weird. They're too accurate. Little dolls that look like people in the household. Tiny objects that seem to know secrets about what's happening behind closed doors. So naturally, Nella gets obsessed with figuring out who this miniaturist is and how they know so much. The show looks gorgeous. Really captures this candlelit Amsterdam winter that feels both beautiful and claustrophobic. There's this gothic atmosphere where you're not sure if something supernatural is happening or if it's all coincidence. And Taylor-Joy is great in it. You watch her go from this naive country girl to someone much tougher over 3 episodes. Mrs. Wilson is based on a true story, and it's one of the wildest things Masterpiece has aired. Ruth Wilson plays her own grandmother in it. It's set in London in 1963. Allison Wilson's husband, Alec, dies suddenly of a heart attack. She's grieving, dealing with arrangements, trying to hold it together for their 2 sons. Then a woman named Gladys shows up at her door claiming to be Alec's wife of 20 years. Gladys wants his body. Allison thought she was Alec's only wife. They got married during World War II when she was working as his secretary in MI6. She had no idea about Gladys, and as Allison starts digging into her late husband's life, it gets worse. Turns out Alec had at least 3 other wives, maybe more, and all of them thought they were the only one. The show plays out like a mystery, except we already know Alec's the culprit. The question is how he pulled it off and why. Was it part of his spy work? Was he just a con man using espionage as cover? Allison's trying to figure this out. Ruth Wilson is fantastic in it, and the story itself is so bizarre that if it wasn't true, you wouldn't believe it. The final episode leaves some things unresolved, but that's kind of the point. Real life didn't give Allison clear answers either. Ruth Wilson and her father, who's Allison and Alec's son, spent years researching this before they made the show, and even they couldn't figure out everything.